So we're going down and zigzag. Do 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 do. Oh no, what am I doing? That's what I needed. And that's what I needed. And that one. That one. As for me, how you see. No. Real easy. As for me, how you see. Come on.
What am I looking in the fridge for? I'm just looking in the bloody freezer. What's it inside? Oh, bloody hell, how cheap then. Let me have a look. Let me have a look, lovely. Well, fucking see. Huh? What are you doing? What's happened inside here? There's a cat been at it. Huh?
I think so.
Oh, bugger.
Mm-hmm.
Keep her out of the way for you. Can we put the heating on? I did, didn't I?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
There. Fixed. Right, done. Right, I'm working on this side of the river. Shut me little down. Let's see, is it? Gotta get my thoughts. Memories forever. It's friendship never ends. People got to get taken to see cause that's the way it is. I here's the story for A to Z. Never get my rebellious again. Look at the end. Place a life in play. To look and see notes. Easy peasy. Number crazy. Real lazy. That's for me, I will say. Shut me pretty down. Right as alright. No. How did I know that song off by heart? I used to be a fan. Unfortunately. Nope, that one's not it. I'll put this one. No. Yeah, got it. Got the little corner. Little corner. I need a drink. Instead of the mellow yellow. No. So music is it? Oh, bugabum. be it. No. Close but no cigar. No, no, no. You don't know me, but I know you. There it is. Leave that one aside for now. No, no, no. I'm gonna have to put some crime on. Scenic by P10.
In 1991, a weekend fishing trip off the coast of Mexico apparently ended in a tragic death for 4 young Americans. But 2 of the bodies were never recovered. Ever since, repeated sightings of a strange young man have been reported up and down Mexico's Baja Peninsula, convincing many that one of the victims, Gordon Collins, is still alive and suffering from amnesia. Tonight, Gordon Collins' family needs your help. Perhaps you hold the crucial clue that can bring their son back home. Join me for this intriguing new case and more on another edition of Unsolved Mysteries. In the 1940s and 50s, a mysterious and terrifying epidemic swept the United States: polio. The victims were almost all children. Thousands died. Thousands more were crippled for life. In 1952, Dr. Jonas Salk developed a vaccine against polio. It was nothing short of a miracle. But for many children, it was a miracle that came too late. Such was the case for Judy Davis of Beverly, Ohio. Judy was just 5 years old in 1949 when both her legs were hopelessly crippled by polio.
My attitude toward polio was, it was a challenge. My parents decided that I was going to live as normal a life as possible, and regardless, the doctors wanted to put me in a convalescent center. And my mother just hit the roof. She says, no way that child is going to live as normal as possible. And I did.
When she was 8, Judy was enrolled in a special elementary school. Then at the age of 12, she entered a regular school where her braces and crutches provoked fear, stares, and uncomfortable giggles. September 1956, the first day of junior high for Judy Davis. Here, Judy would be the only handicapped student. Here she would, for the first time, face a world which might be unintentionally cruel.
I was petrified because I didn't know anyone in the school, so I was really petrified. Oh, my father, he was the type of person who encouraged me to do things for myself, and he kind of instilled in me that there was nothing I couldn't do as long as I tried.
Daddy, I want to do it myself.
Okay, honey.
I was able to get in and out of the car by myself. And I would have been able to climb the stairs to the school if there was a railing, but there was no railing. So I was resolved to let my father carry me into the school.
It's okay, honey.
Seeing all the kids stare at me when I entered the school, it was really an awkward feeling because it was something new for me, and I'd never had that before. My father carried me up the steps and sat me down at the top of the stairs, and this girl comes over and she says,
Hi, I'm Becky. Can I help? Thanks.
Well, what homeroom are you in?
The letter said 102.
That's the same one I'm in. It's Mr. Hawkins. He's pretty good. Come on, I'll show you.
Okay. Bye, Daddy.
Bye, honey.
Judy had made a real friend. In the weeks that followed, she and Becky Terry would become inseparable.
Becky was a very warm person. Very warm, very outgoing. I mean, she had to be to be so open with me the first day of school. But the other kids in the school, it was like I was an alien from outer space. And I felt that way. Except when Becky was around. Around Becky, I felt like everything was possible. She made me feel like there was no braces, there was no crutches, that I was just like her.
All through 7th grade, the girls' friendship grew. In 8th grade, Becky and Judy even took to coordinating their wardrobes. They were often mistaken for sisters, and in fact, no sisters could have been closer.
Becky and I talked about music, we talked about boys, we talked about marriage, we talked about everything under the sun.
But Judy and Becky's favorite subject was definitely boys. At the junior high, serialized horror movies were shown each day at noon. Before long, a boy began sitting next to Becky.
All of a sudden, he wasn't just sitting there, he was holding Becky's hand. Knowing Becky had a boyfriend was, I don't know, it was kind of sad for me because she had a boyfriend and I didn't have a boyfriend. So I felt kind of left out.
Becky's boyfriend was David Major, a fellow 7th grader. But Judy was so shy that she couldn't bring herself to talk to David or to any other boy.
Judy, I can't help you tote your books. Why? Miss
Well, one day Becky had a big load of books and she wasn't able to carry my books on top of her books.
I'll be fine. Are you sure? I mean, give David or one of those other boys to help you. They're right there. I can't ask boys. Yes, you can if it means you might fall. I'll be fine. Are you sure? I'm sure.
I was so shy, I would rather have died than to ask a boy for help. I was very shy at that age, especially around boys. So here I was trying to carry maybe 3 or 4 books, plus pencils, and a notebook, and they fell all over the floor.
Oh, here, let's help you with that.
I had a class with David, so I knew who David was even before Becky and he became involved. And shortly after Becky and David became an item, they broke up. And Becky decided she liked this boy named Gordon, and evidently he liked her because they started holding hands in the movies. And David started holding my hand in the movies. So I was really thrilled about that. It was real exciting because now we both had boyfriends.
A few months later, Becky came to Judy's house in a somber mood. The girls had been through everything 2 friends could experience, except separation.
Hi. What's wrong? Something awful has happened, really awful. My dad got a job. But that's good. It's in West Virginia. We're moving. Moving? We're moving tomorrow. He says he can't wait. Tomorrow? No. 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 No.
I was brokenhearted when Becky told me she was leaving. Becky's friendship to me meant that I was able to be accepted by the other students in the school, and it made me feel like I was more like everyone else, and that there was no difference between us. And at the age of 12, that meant a lot. And it still means a lot.
Becky and Judy wrote to each other for several years, and Becky even came back to visit once. But eventually, they lost touch. In 1960, Judy's condition deteriorated and she was confined to a wheelchair. Nevertheless, Judy went on to marry and have 4 children. She also became an outspoken advocate for the rights of the disabled. In 1979, Judy divorced and later moved to Tucson, Arizona. Through it all, her friendship with Becky has been an inspiration.
I would really like to find Becky. I'd kind of like to tell her how much she meant to me as a friend, and I'd like to get that friendship back if it's possible.
September 1991. A young American, disoriented, penniless, and obviously out of place, wandered into the Mexican village of Colonia Vicente Guerrero, 300 miles south of San Diego, California. He lingered for months, living on handouts, depending on the charity of strangers. For one California couple, tales of the young stranger were a ray of hope in the search for their 34-year-old son, Gordon Collins, who had been missing for 5 months.
I know he's alive. We have our priority now to try to find him. And I can't get on with my business. I can't get on with nothing until, we get him home.
Inside your heart, you're always longing to to that day you're going to be able to hold him and know it's for real.
The strange saga of Gordon Collins began on April 19, 1991. He was vacationing with his girlfriend, Anastasia Seals, and another couple near Santa Rosalia, a popular deep-sea fishing spot midway down the Baja Peninsula. 4 days after they arrived, the group secured a boat at the local hotel. Gordon's friend, Wayne Schwartz, had fished off the Baja coast many times and knew the area well. As the group left port, a fisherman on his way in warned them that a storm was brewing. The fisherman's warnings apparently went unheeded. Several hours later, a fierce storm would indeed hit the area. Gordon Collins and his friends never returned. The next day, a hotel employee was sent out to search for them. His search ended 28 miles northeast. Wayne Schwartz and Gordon's girlfriend, Anastasia Seals, were dead. But Gordon Collins and Schwartz's wife, Arlene Burlington, were nowhere to be found.
The bodies and all the paraphernalia out of the boat was all within 1 square mile of each other. Because I talked to the fellow that fished the bodies out. And we say, well, hey, where's the other 2 jackets? Where's the other 2 people?
For 3 days, the United States Coast Guard searched a 250-mile area of the Sea of Cortez on the Baja shoreline. Finally, they suspended the search, pending further evidence.
Scott, you got anything on the website?
It seemed obvious that Gordon Collins and Arlene Burlington had perished. The U.S. consulate in Mexico asked Gordon and Arlene's parents to sign death certificates. However, reports that Gordon was still alive had already begun to filter across the border. His parents came to believe that he'd been picked up by a fishing boat and brought ashore. They were certain that Gordon was suffering from amnesia and was unable to find his way home. John and Mary Lou Collins traveled from Moreno Valley, California to the area where the two bodies had been recovered. They combed Santa Rosalia, desperately hoping for a clue to Gordon's whereabouts.
We got flyers made up, and so we were spreading them all out when two Mexican fishermen come running up to us and kept pointing to the flyer. He said they seen a guy out of the water, come out of the water. He just had shorts and he was all cut up, waiting there trying to get on a bus there at the bus station. I was very excited. Things started fitting together because this is where the accident happened. They found the bodies just a mile and a half off of this shore. It's got to be Gordy.
Around the same time, Gordon was also sighted on a nearby beach by a man named Jose Peralta.
You have your blanket? Okay. You have your blanket? I'm cold.
Jose said that Gordy said he was waiting for friends he went fishing with. And could he have Jose's blanket because he was going to sleep on the beach there at Cabo and wait for his friends?
Hey, Rito. You're coming.
Neither lead panned out, and the Collins returned home. It was the beginning of a frustrating, seemingly endless pattern.
I would go down until I wouldn't get any more sightings. And then I'd go back home and we'd get a phone call or something. And so, boom, I'd get on a plane and we'd head back on down and hit these areas where the sighting was evidently was at. On one trip, we're headed toward La Paz, and we stopped at a few of these taco places. And they says, yeah, I seen him an hour ago. So we went on down further, probably another 3 or 4 miles, and we stopped again. And the guy said, yeah, we seen him about 30 minutes ago. So we finally got right into town, and they says, yeah, within 5 minutes. And then they seen us together, and I don't know what happened, but everybody just clammed up. We couldn't get no more information. I don't know if they thought we were the police, the FBI, or the DA, or what, you know. And we couldn't get no more information, and bam, it just stopped.
Over the next 3 months, Gordon Collins was spotted at least 50 times in 7 different locations, all in the area of La Paz and Cabo San Lucas at the southern end of the Baja Peninsula. It almost seemed that Gordon Collins had wanted to disappear and might be hiding out. But Gordon had called his parents the day he left for Mexico so they would know where he was. John and Mary Lou Collins are adamant that Gordon would never desert his 10-year-old son Christopher and cause his family such pain and suffering.
I believe he can't remember what happened and cannot make the choice to return home because he doesn't know where, home is. And you can't leave your child wandering around in a country aimlessly. And not only were we exhausted, but our money was exhausted, and we began to think we weren't doing it right. We decided we needed a professional at this point.
The Collins hired Bill Garcia, a private investigator who alerted newspapers in Baja. After the articles ran, Garcia received several calls from the village of Colonia Vicente Guerrero.
He was 4 or 5 months here in town. He never worked here, never worked. And he only hang around. Here in town, he was walking all the time, moved too much here. And almost in the town, everybody knows him.
We've shown them pictures and everyone recognizes him and they're positive that it's him. The people that have talked to him know some things about him, about Gordon, and feel confident that he is there, or was there.
According to Amador, Gordon was eventually arrested for stealing food. The local sheriff, or delegado, brought in James Hatfield, an American living in the village, to translate.
Hello, my name's James. What's yours?
Hi, I'm Gordy.
Gordy, this delegado has something to say to you.
There's no doubt in my mind it's Gordon, because when we met him in jail, I introduced myself to him and he gave me his name, Gordy. And then when the flyer came out, it's right there on the flyer, Gordon, and you can't get the two pictures mixed up. It's the same.
He moved on shortly before we were able to get to that area, and we haven't been able to find where he's gone from there. Gordon seems to be just wandering through the different towns in Baja, not really knowing where he's going. I don't think he's attempting to get home because he seems to go north, then he seems to travel back south.
Over the next year, sporadic sightings of Gordon continued. The last was near the village of Rosarita, 25 miles south of Tijuana. The U.S. consulate has now officially reversed its position and no longer presumes that Gordon Collins is dead.
You just can't up and give up because it's your son. I know it keeps me driving, it keeps me going, and I want to get him home, you know, to get him home safe and back to normal again.
Recently, we featured the story of W.B. Mac McDonald, a self-made millionaire who was searching for his heir, a child whom Mac had seen but once, 43 years ago. Mac's story began in 1948 in Pomona, California. That summer, he fell in love with a 16-year-old girl named Mary Helen Carr. But their courtship was cut short by Mary Helen's mother. She threatened to have Mac arrested if the romance continued.
My whole life was revolving around her. It upset me, you know, because I was in love with a girl and we were planning on a future together. And here were these tremendous stumbling blocks being thrown out into the path.
Mac moved to Houston, Texas. 3 weeks later, Mary Helen ran away from home and joined him. Posing as husband and wife, the young lovers moved in together. But their happiness was short-lived.
Hello? Just a minute.
Who is it?
A friend tipped off Mac that the police were on the way to the apartment. Mary Helen's mother had made good on her threats. Authorities carried warrants charging Mac with statutory rape and illegally living with a minor.
That's fine. I'll call you.
Mac made his escape with no time to spare.
I was devastated again. They jerked her back to California. And I had no way of contacting her again.
A year later, Mac returned to California and was shocked to learn that he was a father. He visited Mary Helen and met his child for the first and only time. But fearing that authorities were still looking for him, Mac fled after only 5 minutes. He never even learned if the baby was a boy or a girl. Now a wealthy businessman, Mac wants to find the child he left behind 43 years ago.
I feel that the youngster's entitled to my estate, and I'd want that youngster to know that I love them, and I want them to have the best.
The night of our broadcast, Mac McDonald learned that he had a daughter named Sherry. The long-awaited news came from a viewer in Dallas, Texas, Mary Helen Carr, Sherry's mother. Unlike many of the reunions we have featured, the end of this search evoked decidedly mixed emotions. For Mac, for Mary Helen, and especially for their daughter Sherry, who'd been raised by a loving and caring stepfather.
I'm 43 years old and pretty well set in my life and everything, and I didn't know what to think. You know, I'm very happily married and have 2 great kids, and you know, and we just are a normal American family, and this was quite a shock to everyone.
1 week after our broadcast, Mac McDonald arrived at Sherry's home in Denver, Colorado. For Mac, the reunion would bring a bittersweet and at times unsettling reconciliation with the past.
No. Come on in. Yes, hi, Mac.
It's hard to describe the feeling that I had for my daughter when I opened the door and she was there and I was able to hold her.
Sit down.
So I'm going to hold you.
I just tried to come to the realization that it really was my father standing there. And I just, does he look like me? Does he act like me? You know, I have all these things I need to learn about him.
I don't know what to say. I'm still in a state of shock.
At this point in my life, to find that there is someone who is my father and who wants to establish a relationship with me, it's just emotionally very traumatic.
Apparently he wants to be part of her life. And if that's the case, it's okay. I hope since he's gone to this much effort to find her that he doesn't bring any sorrow to her.
The fact that I didn't stay and fight the battle, it's most unfortunate. I don't believe I would do it that way again. However, yesterday unfortunately can't be redone. I'd like to.
No matter how you look at it, he left my mother with a tiny baby, you know, and I have to deal with that. I have to deal with the fact that I have a father who loves for me, who's raised me, who's cared for me. But I believe there's enough room in this family for everyone. And I sincerely mean that.
On the afternoon of March 11th, 1992, paramedics were dispatched to an emergency at a toy store in Redwood City, California. Inside, sprawled on a table in the employee's lunchroom, was 23-year-old Gilbert Ortiz. He was sweating profusely and experiencing severe convulsions.
Cramps in the stomach? Gilbert, what did you drink? Did you drink or eat something? A shake. What's in a shake, Gilbert?
Gilbert managed to tell the medics that he'd become ill after drinking a high-protein amino acid milkshake, commonly used by bodybuilders to help them bulk up and strengthen muscle.
Gilbert, where did you get the shake from?
Friend.
A friend? Yeah. And how long ago did you drink this, Gilbert?
That's part of it, isn't it?
Gilbert began to slip in and out of consciousness.
Yeah.
His wife was contacted, and paramedics rushed him to nearby Sequoia Hospital.
Is that the shake right there?
Doctors in the emergency room were baffled by Gilbert's condition. They examined the plastic bottle which had contained the shake and set it aside so the contents could be tested later. Within moments, Gilbert's wife Elizabeth arrived in the emergency room. Doctors hoped that she could provide an explanation for Gilbert's sudden, mysterious illness.
The paramedics just brought him over here just a few minutes ago, and they said that after taking that sports drink over there, about 15 minutes later he started vomiting. He's very disoriented. I can't get anything straight out of him. Have you ever seen that bottle?
No, never. I've never seen it.
You know what we're thinking? We're thinking he might have had an overdose of drugs, maybe some street drugs or maybe something else.
Gilbert doesn't do drugs.
Are you sure?
No, I'm serious. Gilbert doesn't do drugs.
Is that nice?
By 10 o'clock that evening, Gilbert had developed pneumonia and his kidneys had failed. He was admitted to the intensive care unit. He would later suffer cardiac arrest and slip into a coma. As his life hung in the balance, doctors worked feverishly to determine what had caused him to become so violently ill. Sometime that afternoon, the plastic milkshake bottle, similar to this one, mysteriously disappeared. It was a first in a series of bizarre incidents that would lead authorities to believe that Gilbert Ortiz had been poisoned by someone he thought he could trust. In 1987, Gilbert was serving in the Army when he met Elizabeth Fuentes. They married 3 years later, shortly after the birth of their son, Jonathan. Gilbert took an entry-level position in the toy store in Redwood City. But he and Elizabeth frequently fought over money. In March of 1992, Gilbert received a promotion and the future suddenly seemed brighter. Less than a week later, Gilbert was in the hospital, fighting for his life. Gilbert's mother and sister soon joined Elizabeth at the hospital. They said that while they were in the waiting room, Elizabeth received a strange phone call which seemed to upset her.
Yes. Okay, bye.
She got nervous when she came back from that phone call. I don't know why. I don't know what they told her.
I'm gonna go home and I think I should check on Jonathan. And I need to get something to eat too.
And so she decided that she was going to go see Jonathan, that she was concerned about Jonathan for some reason. And she was going to go to Gilbert's work because she knew the combination for the locker, and she was going to go see if she could find anything because Gilbert wasn't getting any better.
He's got Jonathan! That man has Jonathan!
And about 2 hours later, she came back. She was hysterical, and she kept saying, somebody has Jonathan, this guy has Jonathan, somebody has Jonathan.
What happened? That man outside has Jonathan.
What man?
That man outside in the parking lot. He said he was gonna hurt Jonathan.
Wait, he has Jonathan outside?
No, the man said he was gonna kidnap him.
Wait a minute, I thought Jonathan was with your mother.
And so I was like, wait, your mom has Jonathan.
Kidnap Jonathan.
I'm gonna call your mom.
And I went and I called her mom, and her mom, I asked her, is Jonathan there? And then she's all like, yeah, he's right here. I'm like, why? I'm like, because Elizabeth just said that some guy had him.
While Brenda was on the phone, Elizabeth blurted out a disjointed, frightening story. She said she had been approached by a small boy in the hospital parking lot, who then directed her to a masked man in a parked car.
Did you know him? No, he was wearing a mask. I couldn't see.
What kind of mask?
I don't know, it just covered his face. Couldn't see his face.
What did you do? What did he say?
He said that he knew what had happened to Gilbert and that Gilbert had drank the wrong stuff.
What?
The stuff in the bag.
You said Gilbert drank the stuff?
Yeah.
Inside the paper bag was a bottle of liquid insecticide.
I'm calling the police.
No, don't call the police. He said if you call the police, he was going to hurt Jonathan.
I'm calling the police.
The ICU nurse immediately made 2 phone calls, one to the National Poison Control Center and the other to the Redwood City Police.
This is Sequoia Hospital. I have a poisoning to report. I need to speak to an officer.
I don't know. I didn't see it after the paramedics.
5 days later, Elizabeth was questioned about the mysterious masked man she said had handed her the insecticide.
So tell me about the little boy that ran after you. Well, when I was in my car, I turned on my car and I was...
For about the first hour of the interview, she maintained the story that she had given the officers and the nurses at the scene, stating that the man with the mask and a little boy, and she told me that she thought it was definitely a strange story, but it was the truth.
Elizabeth, if what you're telling us is the truth, how would this guy have known that Gilbert drank this thing?
How should I know?
Well, how would the little boy know?
I don't know. I've never seen any of these people before in my life.
Your story doesn't make sense.
I still couldn't believe what she was telling me, and so my partner and I started to jam her by, telling her certain things to see how she would react, like we knew more than we actually did.
And that man gave me the bottle.
There was a witness in the parking lot. He didn't see a man with a mask, and he didn't see a little boy. All he saw was you. There was no masked man, and there was no little boy.
Okay, all right, okay. I made that part up.
Why?
Because the doctor, he said that whatever Gilbert drank was in the house, okay? And so I went, he asked me if I had any insecticides, and I looked, I searched in the house, and that's when I found the bottle.
Well, why did you make the story up about the man with the mask and the little boy?
Because I was scared. I didn't know if Gilbert had done this to himself on purpose.
She told me that maybe he was trying to hurt himself, and so I asked her, you mean you think he was trying to take his own life? And she said, yeah, maybe he was depressed, and I didn't want him to get in trouble.
Elizabeth, would you be willing to take a lie detector test?
Look, I have a job interview, okay? So I gotta go.
What about the lie detector test?
Okay, when?
Later this afternoon, after your interview.
Okay, I'll be back.
Elizabeth never returned to the police station. The next morning, Detective Anderson reached her at her mother's house in San Francisco, 20 minutes from Redwood City. This time, Elizabeth refused to come in.
Talk to your lawyer about it, please, and give me a call back. Gilbert, I'm going to ask you.
11 days later, Gilbert regained consciousness and police suspicions were finally confirmed. Gilbert had apparently been poisoned by his own wife.
Elizabeth, she was working for some people. And she called me about 12 or so and told me she wanted to have lunch with me.
Gilbert explained that Elizabeth had told him about a co-worker's son who had bulked up by drinking amino acid milkshakes.
You know, I lift weights and all, but I could never get big. And that's the kind of guy she likes.
Do you know this guy?
No. Some guy she worked for.
So she mixed something up and brought it for you to drink?
No, the guy mixed it up, gave it to her. She came to my work lunchtime and dropped it off.
Gilbert said Elizabeth met him around 2 p.m. in the toy store parking lot.
Hey, hi.
The shake was already mixed in a plastic sports bottle.
Here's your shake. He told me to tell you to drink it before you eat anything.
It smells like chocolate. What did he say was in it?
Amino acid?
They're supposed to make me stronger?
Yeah. This guy is real big. He's real buffed. And he said it might taste a little nasty, but it's okay. It's supposed to.
Well, actually, I didn't open it until I got inside. It looked like a real shake. I mean, like a chocolate shake. That's what I looked at it. So I kind of tried it, right? And then when I tried it, it sort of like burned my throat a little bit. I said, maybe that's the way it's supposed to taste. I don't know. I don't know if it was supposed to be sour or, I don't know, spicy. Because it was spicy, but I thought that's the way it was. And I kept drinking it, but I didn't touch the food at all. And then pretty close, I almost finished the bottle. And then I started feeling really hot, and my throat's really burning, and I was all shaky. And then I felt like getting sick.
Then I passed out. Then I was in the emergency room.
Gilbert, what I'd like to do...
Police obtained a search warrant to see if they could trace the poison or the plastic bottle to Elizabeth. But when they arrived at the Ortiz apartment, they made a startling discovery. Elizabeth Ortiz had vanished, along with the couple's 2-year-old son, Jonathan.
Then that's when it hit me. She did it then. It really, really hurt it. You know, especially when they told me, I said, where's the baby? He's gone. That's the main part that really got me. Her, you know, fine, she's gone, but the kid, you know, I was too attached to the kid. I still am.
Nearly 1 year has passed since Gilbert Ortiz was poisoned, but he still has not fully recovered. The insecticide caused serious damage to his liver and nervous system. His right foot is numb, and he has difficulty walking without assistance.
Doctors don't know if I'm gonna get back to normal, or if it's permanent damage to my nerves. Same thing with my hands. Tip of my fingers, numbed, can't feel anything. That really messed up my life because if I can't do anything with my feet, I can't work.
Jonathan Fuentes Ortiz has not been seen since March 17, 1992. He was born on May 13, 1990, and has brown eyes and black hair. An arrest warrant has been issued for Elizabeth Fuentes Ortiz. The charge, attempted murder with a special consideration for torture. Elizabeth is 23 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighs 140 pounds. She has black hair, brown eyes, and a prominent cleft in her chin. On a previous broadcast, we featured the agonizing story of a young English woman, Delia Fasani. In 1964, she was 18 years old, unmarried, and had just had a baby whom she named Michelle. At her father's insistence, Delia was staying at a convent until the baby was adopted. 2 weeks after the baby was born, Delia's parents visited the convent. Delia hoped once her father saw Michelle, he would relent, but he wouldn't even look at his granddaughter. In the end, Delia had no choice but to give up her daughter for adoption.
You've only got 30 minutes to say goodbye. What you try to do is look at her face to burn the impression into your mind, and so you feel the shawl, and well, maybe because it's warm, but you're feeling her body because that was the last time you're going to see her, and that was it. I can't explain it. 1 minute I had a baby, next minute it was gone.
Two photographs were all that Delia had to remember Michelle, and she never stopped trying to locate her. Finally, after 15 years of frustrated research, Delia's efforts began to pay off. Last July, Delia learned that her daughter had been renamed Laura. An adoptions official agreed to send a letter to Laura that Delia had written. In the brief note, Delia said that she would soon appear in Unsolved Mysteries and asked her daughter to view the broadcast. 1964. Delia Fasani sat in New York Mills, New York, on the evening our program was aired, Delia's daughter, Laura Franklin, experienced firsthand the heartbreaking events leading up to her adoption.
But he just didn't want the responsibility of it. That was just the way they did things then. They just left the responsibility with the girl.
When I found out my birth mother was searching for me, it was pretty touching to know that she had looked that far to try to find me.
If you have any information, please call our toll-free number, 1-800-876-53. After the broadcast, Laura contacted our telecenter and asked to be put in touch with her birth mother. Against nearly impossible odds, Delia had at last found her daughter, a continent away amidst a population of millions. On September 19, 1992, Laura, her husband, their two children, and Laura's closest friends assembled at Syracuse International Airport. The separation of birth mother and daughter that had lasted more than a quarter of a century was about to end.
There was a lot of anticipation, a lot of what's she going to think when she sees me, and what is she going through right now.
She was everything and more that I'd expected. Absolutely everything. She's a beautiful girl. Proud of her.
Before Laura's adoptive mother died in 1989, she had shared all she knew of Laura's background. Delia and Laura could now fill in the remaining gaps in nearly 30 years of family history.
Finding my birth mother now, I don't think has really changed my life as much as it has probably enhanced it, because now I can find out some about my past and my history and things that I never thought that I would ever find out about.
I can't replace her mother, but I'd like to think that I could be pretty close.
The September reunion is only a beginning. At Christmas, Laura and her family plan to travel to England, where they will spend time with Delia and the many relatives looking forward to meeting them for the first time. Join me next time. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery.
This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now.
On the evening before his death, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered one of the most stirring and prophetic speeches of his life.
And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you.
Less than 24 hours after he spoke those words, Martin Luther King was assassinated. His accused killer, James Earl Ray, pled guilty to the murder, and the case was officially closed. This Sunday marks the 25th anniversary of Dr. King's death. It is a milestone that has focused renewed attention on the circumstances surrounding the investigation of James Earl Ray. Just 3 days after his conviction, Ray recanted his guilty plea, alleging that he was but a pawn in a wide-ranging conspiracy to kill King. Ray's claims of innocence, however, were dismissed, and the case remained closed. In 1976, 8 years after King's death, a select committee of the U.S. House of Representatives was impaneled to reinvestigate the assassinations of King and President John F. Kennedy. The committee concluded that James Earl Ray was the lone assassin of Dr. King. It is a conclusion, however, that Walter Fauntleroy, the chairman of the King subcommittee, now believes was wrong.
When you look at a murder, you look at three things. Who had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. I'm not now satisfied that James Earl Ray had a sufficient motive, that he had the means, and certainly the opportunity to pull it off as it was done.
I also thought I could establish that I was at a service station during the time that Martin Luther King was shot.
To this day, James Earl Ray maintains that he did not shoot Martin Luther King, but the FBI stands by their original finding. Ray was the lone gunman. Now, some researchers claim that new information corroborates Ray's allegations of conspiracy. Based in part on that new information, Walter Fauntleroy is calling for a new investigation and for the immediate public release of the committee's files, currently sealed until the year 2029. Tonight, we will examine both sides of this complex and controversial case. Join me for this special presentation and more on Unsolved Mysteries.
Social organizations, grassroots organizations should make it...
Martin Luther King arrived in Memphis on April 3, 1968, the day before he was assassinated. King checked into the Lorraine Motel and began planning a march in support of striking city sanitation workers. King's presence at the motel had been well publicized by the press. Across the street from the motel was a series of rundown buildings, which included a rooming house run by a woman named Bessie Brewer. On April 4th, shortly before 6 p.m., William Anschutz, a tenant of the rooming house, found the building's communal bathroom locked. What you are about to see is the official government account of the assassination of Martin Luther King. Inside the bathroom, James Earl Ray, a career petty criminal, loaded a high-powered rifle and took aim at room 306 of the Lorraine Motel. King stepped out of that room to go to dinner. A single deadly shot rang out. The bullet struck King in the face, throwing him violently backward onto the balcony. Several friends rushed to his aid. His wounds, however, were severe and irreparable. According to the government, as King lay dying, James Earl Ray raced into the room he had rented earlier that day. He wrapped the rifle along with an overnight bag containing personal items in a bedspread. In the hallway, Ray was seen by Charles Quitman Stevens, who lived in the room adjacent to the bathroom. Mere seconds from a clean getaway, the government believes Ray saw a police car and panicked, dropping his bundle in the doorway of the Knipe Amusement Company.
Looked like somebody dropped something.
A moment later, 3 witnesses inside the building saw a white car, possibly a Mustang, speed away. Police recovered the rifle along with Ray's effects, but by the time they identified Ray, he had fled the country. 2 months later, Ray was apprehended by British authorities at London's Heathrow Airport as he attempted to board a flight to Brussels. On March 10, 1969, in Memphis, Tennessee, James Earl Ray pled guilty to the murder of Martin Luther King. Ray was sentenced to 99 years in the state penitentiary. 3 days after his conviction, however, Ray fired his attorney and claimed he had been pressured into pleading guilty. Ray denied shooting King and, incredibly, alleged that he himself was a victim of an intricate conspiracy which used him as a hapless scapegoat for the assassination. Over the years, Ray's claim has found many supporters who argue that the possibility of a conspiracy was never adequately investigated by either state officials or the FBI. James Earl Ray spent most of his adult life in and out of prison. Though extensive, his criminal career was comprised almost exclusively of small-time holdups and robberies, none of which involved violence. Indeed, to many, Ray seemed an unlikely candidate for such a notorious crime.
I find it more difficult today than I found it at the time when we closed down the investigation to believe that James Earl Ray, acting alone, pulled off the crime of the century, was able to get out of Memphis, out of the country into Canada, to get 3 passports, and to go all the way to Europe without help.
On April 23, 1967, almost a year before King was assassinated, James Earl Ray escaped from the state penitentiary in Jefferson City, Missouri, where he was serving a 20-year sentence for robbing a grocery store. For some, Ray's subsequent movements and activities are strong evidence of a conspiracy. Ray initially fled to Chicago, and then in mid-July to Montreal. Using the name Eric Starvo Galt, he discreetly solicited the criminal underground for a phony passport or seaman's papers.
I hear you're looking for something.
According to Ray, he was eventually approached by a shadowy character who used only the name Raoul.
How hard would it be to get Canadian seaman's papers?
Ray claims that almost 9 months later, it was Raoul who set him up as the fall guy for the King assassination.
Some cash?
But when they first met, Ray says Raoul was only looking for an accomplice in a smuggling scheme.
A few deliveries?
How many?
Ray claimed that in exchange for Ray's agreeing to perform certain tasks, evidently of a criminal nature, 1, he was provided with money, and 2, he was promised that at some point he would be given identification, a passport, something he needed to get out of the country.
Where will these deliveries be?
Ray alleges that his first job with Raoul involved smuggling unknown contraband across the U.S.-Canadian border near Detroit, for which Ray was paid $750. Ray claims he was then directed by Raoul to go to Birmingham, Alabama. Ray has detailed his travels to his current attorney, William Pepper. Ironically, Pepper had once been an associate of Dr. King's. In 1978, Pepper was persuaded by one of King's closest friends, Ralph Abernathy, to meet with Ray. Pepper is now convinced that Ray's story is true and that Raoul is the key to the conspiracy.
Well, what Raoul did from that point on was to keep James on a string, have him
at various points and places, pay him bits of money, have him do various things, and really pretty much keep him on a string so that he was available, as it turns out, for use any time that they wanted to use him, always with the promise of these travel documents.
When's the last time you changed your brake pads? 30 months ago. I got over 20,000 on the first set.
Ray says that in Birmingham, Raul gave him $2,000 and told him to purchase a car.
17.
On August 30th, 1967, 7 months before the assassination, Ray did in fact buy a white 1966 Mustang.
All right, 2,000 is. You got yourself one hell of a car.
Ray says he then drove to Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, where he and Raul engaged in another smuggling venture. A month later, Ray traveled to Los Angeles to await further instructions. In mid-March, less than 3 weeks before the assassination, Raul told Ray to leave for Atlanta. There, on March 29th, just 5 days before the assassination, Raul outlined their next criminal enterprise.
I'm going to need you to buy a gun.
What for?
I have a new client. He wants to purchase some rifles. 200.
You can't buy 200 weapons?
You'll only need one. Right now, he just wants to see a sample.
What kind of rifle?
Next bit of activity they were going to be involved in had to do with selling guns. And the scenario that he developed was one which involved the purchase of sort of sample weapons, and that he, Raul, would show to these gun runners. And once they then made a selection or made a choice, so the story went, they would be bought in volume.
Ray alleges that later that day, he and Raul drove to Birmingham. Following Raul's instructions, Ray went to a gun shop where he purchased a .243 caliber rifle, which he had fitted with a telescopic sight.
Not sure, but I'm going deer hunting with my brother.
The evidence is that from the people who witnessed his purchase of the rifle in Birmingham, is that he didn't know the first thing about rifles. He was confused about what he wanted, didn't know what he wanted, bought the wrong rifle. So he didn't have the kind of familiarity with firearms that you would expect of somebody who was going to murder someone.
This isn't going to work.
Why?
The caliber's too small.
He said it was a good deer rifle.
It's not suitable for our purposes.
I was wondering if I could exchange it. Why is that? Is something wrong with this one?
Ray says Raul told him to exchange the weapon the next day, giving him specific instructions on what to buy.
Remington model 760 Game Master, pump action.
Ray claims he gave the Remington Game Master rifle to Raul at the New Rebel Motel in Memphis on April 3rd, the day before the assassination.
This will do fine.
So, when will you need another 200?
I'm not sure. After my clients.
According to James Earl Ray, that was the last time he saw the rifle. The official investigation concluded that it was used to kill Martin Luther King the next day. At 3:30 p.m. on the day of Martin Luther King's assassination, James Earl Ray claims he met his mysterious contact Raul at Jim's Grill, a local coffee shop.
I'm going to need a room to meet with my client.
Where?
Ray says Raul told him to go to Bessie Brewer's rooming house upstairs. Okay. He wanted Ray to rent a room, then await instructions. Bessie Brewer's fronted Main Street, next to the Knipe Amusement Company, where the rifle would later be found. The back windows of Bessie's, however, where the communal bathroom was located, faced Mulberry Street and the Lorraine Motel.
How long you staying? I don't know. A couple of nights, maybe.
At 4 p.m., Ray rented a room using the alias John Willard. Raul had instructed Ray to bring along an overnight bag for appearance's sake. Ray says Raul also told him to leave the Mustang parked nearby because Raul wanted to use it that night.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Pay in advance.
The next hour is pure speculation. Ray himself has changed his story several times, but he has always maintained that he left the boarding house at around 5 p.m. and never returned. Ray says that just before 6, he drove the Mustang to a local service station. At 6:01 p.m., Martin Luther King was shot.
I got a leak in one of the back tires. You got a minute to take a look at it?
Not right now. We're awful busy. Could you come back in a couple of hours?
All right, thanks.
Ray claims that at the very moment King was shot, he himself was totally unaware of the event and was driving from the gas station back to the rooming house.
And as he got to the corner of Calhoun and South Main, he saw already that there were police barricades and policemen everywhere. Well, the state makes a great deal of the fact that James fled the scene, you know. But James was, one must remember, a fugitive. He was on the run, and he was certainly not going to hang around wherever he saw police. So he turned left, headed in the opposite direction, and began to make his way out of Memphis.
Was it James Earl Ray who targeted room 306 at the Lorraine Motel from the window of Bessie Brewer's rooming house? For many skeptics, Ray's apparent lack of expertise with firearms seems to argue against the official account.
In the Army, he was trained with an M1, and he was at the lowest level of ability. The idea of loading by hand a single shot into that 30-06 and gambling everything on that one shot makes no sense whatsoever.
You have to bear in mind that from the window of the rooming house to the balcony where Dr. King was killed was less than 100 yards. With the telescopic sight at such a short distance, almost anyone in the world could have killed Dr. King. It really required no great marksmanship whatsoever.
Many people have come to believe that the shot which killed Martin Luther King came not from the boarding house window, but instead from the bushy abutment between the boarding house and the motel.
It's now clear to me that the shot is likely to have come from the ground below, where at least two persons personally known to me reported that, at least to me, that they thought the shot came from someone in the bushes below.
Two eyewitnesses, one of them Dr. King's driver, do say they saw someone dressed in white running from the bushes just after the shooting.
We never were sure that there was a man in the bushes, and if there was a man in the bushes, we think he had absolutely nothing to do with the murder. We were then, and I still am, totally convinced that the fatal shot came from the window of the rooming house.
The official version states that Ray ran from Bessie Brewer's, observed by another tenant, Charles Stevens. However, there are serious doubts about Stevens' credibility.
From all accounts, Stevens was so dead drunk that there's no way of relying upon his testimony about the shot.
In fact, we did not rely on him for an eyewitness identification. What we did rely on him for was having sufficient senses to be aware of a loud noise down the hall and in the bathroom, and to open the door and see somebody run by.
What you have to realize about Charlie Stevens is that he was looking for a reward. He was trying to get the $100,000 reward that had been put up for anyone who could identify the slayer of Dr. King. So that became very much a business for him, and it became very much his concern to try to be credible.
In his flight from the rooming house, Ray purportedly ran by the Knipe Amusement Company, dropping his weapon in a panic. But a former defense investigator believes it highly improbable that any killer, no matter how panicked, would drop a bundle of evidence so thoroughly incriminating.
He didn't have to take all that junk with him. He didn't even have to take the rifle with him. Even if he'd used the rifle, all he had to do was get out.
It strikes many people, myself included, that that looks like a setup, that somebody else gathered that evidence up and planted it there.
A dusting of the rooming house turned up a number of fingerprints which were never identified, but the investigation failed to turn up even a single print belonging to James Earl Ray.
That's not really strange. I've worked any number of cases where you don't find fingerprints when you think you should. You may find a lot of smudges and smears, but you won't find a fingerprint that in itself is complete enough to make a positive identification.
The abandoned gun was void of fingerprints except for 2 of James Earl Ray's. As part of the investigation, the FBI swab tested the rifle Ray had returned to determine whether or not it had been fired. However, they never conducted a swab test on the gun they believed to be the murder weapon.
My recollection is that it had a spent shell that was in the chamber. So common sense would tell you that someone had fired that rifle.
The FBI could not match the bullet which killed King with the rifle. They could say only that the bullet was consistent with that type of rifle.
The fact that the bullet markings are said to have been consistent with having been from the rifle means absolutely nothing. It was also consistent with several million other rifles of the same kind.
Ray bought the rifle. The rifle was used to shoot King. He fled the scene. His fingerprints are on it. His explanations for an alibi, his flight, all don't hold water.
Even for those who believe Ray's story, there remains a nagging question. If indeed James Earl Ray is innocent, why did he plead guilty?
I just am not going to discuss it.
Ray claims that he was coerced by his attorney, who wanted exclusive publishing rights to Ray's story. If Ray had testified in court, his allegations of conspiracy would have become public domain.
This will do fine.
The crucial element of Ray's story was the elusive Raoul, the man Ray said had moved him like a puppet all over the United States.
Where do you want me to be next?
In our investigation to identify Ray and to find out what he did and where and when, we turned up nothing to indicate that there was either a Raoul or any other conspirator involved in this crime.
In 1975, former defense investigator Harold Weisberg filed a lawsuit against the FBI. He received 60,000 pages of documents on the King assassination. 3 years later, Weisberg found evidence in the files that Ray had been involved with a man named J.C. Harden. Weisberg believes that evidence is proof of a conspiracy.
When I was going through the files of the Los Angeles FBI office, I found where a man who used the name of J.C. Harden had called Jimmy from Atlanta.
Yeah, he's here, room 313, but he's out. I saw him go out about an hour ago.
Ask him to call James C. Harden. H-A-R-D-I-N.
When Jimmy didn't return the call, so far as we know, Harden then went out to California, and he met with Jimmy. This is a confirmed story in the FBI's records.
313.
Is it possible that J.C. Harden, the man who visited James Earl Ray 3 weeks before the assassination, was in fact Raoul? At the very least, the timing of the visit appears to be more than simple coincidence.
It is a live lead. The one thing you have to question, given the history of this whole thing, Harden goes to California, Jimmy goes east. Jimmy goes east on the trip in which Dr. King gets killed. It's not like pushing buttons, but it's the next thing to it. And that should have been investigated.
In 1968, the FBI pursued the lead long enough to create this sketch of J.C. Harden, based on a description given by the manager of the St. Francis Hotel. However, as soon as James Earl Ray was arrested, the Harden investigation was dropped.
We knew nothing about Harden. I'd like to find Mr. Harden, and I'd like further to interrogate Mr. Ray, because I don't think he is telling us everything that he knows that may lead us to a different conclusion than that which we've reached, we reached back in 1978.
James Earl Ray has refused to say whether J.C. Harden and Raoul are one and the same. In addition, he has been unwilling to make a positive identification of Raoul.
I don't have any reason to believe that Harden could be Raoul, because I don't really have any reason to believe that Raoul is Raoul. I'm not convinced that there is anybody named Raoul involved in this case.
There is no way that James Earl Ray is a lone assassin. James Earl Ray is the classic patsy Martin King was killed as a result of a conspiracy.
We do not know the whole truth about this. We need to know it in the decade of the 90s, when we've got a new generation of leadership on the scene that we don't want to meet the same fate that Martin, Malcolm, Bobby, and John met.
Will we ever know? The answer is no. We won't know because the FBI in 1968 didn't conduct an adequate conspiracy investigation. They conducted a shooter investigation and then stopped.
I've seen the promised land.
And that's one of the tragedies in Dr. King's death. He did not get, in his death, an investigation commensurate with the dignity of his life. Had he gotten it, many of the unanswered questions about his death would have answers today.
In 1943, the outcome of World War II hung in the balance as U.S. and Allied forces launched an all-out assault on the German and Italian strongholds in North Africa. After months of fierce combat and thousands of Allied casualties, enemy resistance finally collapsed. But during the summer and fall, sporadic fighting continued to claim American lives. One of those killed in action was Army Private Harry A. Young from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He left behind a wife and 2 sons. 37 years later, Harry Young would become the focal point of an unsolved mystery when his son and granddaughter came across his obituary while researching their family history. The information in the death notice seemed all wrong, as if it had been written for a completely different man.
He was survived by a 3-month-old daughter, Kathleen. When I found a notice, then I realized that it wasn't written right. Mother's first name was right and everything, but the address and the fact that there was a baby girl mentioned and me or my brother was not mentioned. Well, at first I thought that the paper made a mistake, which wasn't common. You know, papers do make mistakes, and I thought maybe that they had got the information wrong, and I had a copy made so I could go into it further.
Imagine reading your father's obituary and stumbling upon a dark family secret which had been kept hushed for more than 37 years. Albert Young was suddenly confronted with 2 puzzling questions. Why had he and his brother Jimmy not been listed as survivors? Was a 3-month-old girl named in the notice a sister they never knew existed? Albert Young's search for answers took him back to the early days of the Second World War. Following the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, Harry Young and millions of other Americans rushed to enlist in the service.
I can't stay here while there's a war going on. I need you to sign this paper.
But Harry had already served 6 years in the Marine Corps, and at age 30, with a family to support, he was required to get his wife Laura's permission to re-enlist.
6 years, I'd like to have a little help.
Look, 2 years. I'll be back. Just sign the paper.
No.
Laura adamantly refused.
Laura!
Harry Young walked out that day, never to return. He had no idea that Laura was pregnant with her second child. 4 months later, using forged documents, Harry enlisted in the Army and was sent overseas to fight in the African campaign. Only then did he inform Laura of what he had done.
Mrs. Young? This
Yes.
is from the War Department.
On October 24th, 1943, Laura Young received the news every soldier's wife fears. Her husband, Harry, was dead. A short time later, the local office of the Veterans Administration uncovered a serious problem. According to their records, Harry Young was survived by 2 wives.
Mrs. Young, there seems to be a problem. We have another Laura Young who has already filed for Harry's death benefits.
But I'm Harry's wife.
Well, that may be, ma'am. Do you have a daughter?
No, I have 2 sons.
Do you live on Fayette Street in Conshohocken?
No, I've always lived in Philadelphia.
Well, this certainly does pose a problem.
From what I have found out, there were 2 women collecting benefits for 1 man.
Yep, see you later, everybody. I'm gonna call it. I know I forgot, I was too busy. I got into this. Right, I shall see you guys soon. Lots of love. Bye, everybody.